Thank you for tuning into Independent Wrestling Profiles. Today we're talking with generational Alex Gagne. When did you get interested in wrestling initially?
Well, I mean, I've got the classic wrestler's story. I saw wrestling for the first time when I was 4 years old. Um, my parents turned on Monday Night Raw, and I was hooked. Right, ever since then I couldn't stop watching. Growing up, my stepdad had a VHS box set of WrestleManias 1 through 13 or whatever it was, and I wore those out. Just watched every single one of them day after day for 3 summers in a row. And then, watching Monday Night Raw and SmackDown on Thursdays and, Heat before pay-per-view. It was just obsessed with wrestling. So that's ever since then, at the age of 4, I've been in love with professional wrestling. And I always, in the back of my mind, I was always I got to do this at some point. So when I, finally figured that there was a school nearby, I was like, okay, I'm going to give this a shot. And that's how it all started.
So were you primarily a WWE guy back then?
For the most part. I mean, WWE, I'd watch the odd WCW show, and I played the WCW games, of course, because, they were great. But yeah, mostly WWE. And then my, toss on the odd pay-per-view from WCW, ECW, but then obviously they disappeared rather quickly. So yeah.
4 is a pretty early age to really start getting into the fandom of wrestling. Was there any element of it or any performers in particular that caught your eye and got you interested to tune in the following week? Or was it more just this is a family thing, we're all going to watch?
It was definitely a family thing, but I think there were performers that got me hooked. I think it was more the fact that everybody in my family had a favorite wrestler. My mom at the time loved The Undertaker. My stepdad was a Stone Cold guy. I was terrified of Kane, but couldn't look away. I couldn't look away, but I was terrified. It was just, it was just one of those captivating auras with him. And my sister was a huge Lita fan. So yeah, we watched wrestling and we watched who we liked, and it was great.
Were you always athletic, or was this something that you had to transition into once you actually decided to start training into wrestling?
I wouldn't have considered myself athletic to a crazy degree. I wrestled in high school. I did amateur wrestling in high school. I played football for a bit in high school as well, but I was a lineman. So I'm not running downfield at, 20 miles an hour or anything. And I was a bigger kid when I was, in my teens. But the moment I started wrestling and I kind of, started doing some of the drills, I realized, I can do this. I have, the ability to do this. And that just built my confidence up even more. And with my coaches telling me you have what it takes to do this stuff. So put the work in and do it.
So you said you just saw that there was a school nearby. Where were you at your point in life? What were you up to at the time when you saw this wrestling school and decided, I want to make this pivot?
So I was working in radio broadcasting, and because that's what I went to school for. So I was working between radio stations in Guelph and Kitchener, and I was working ridiculous hours. I was up at 2:00 in the morning, working till noon, home for a quick nap, and then working a 3 to 11 kind of thing. And in the downtime, I'd be on my work computer and watching New Japan and watching whatever was hot at the time, because I was still super into wrestling. And I was I'm curious to see if there's any wrestling schools nearby. So I fire up Google and wrestling schools near me. And I came across the Crossbody Academy Facebook page and realized, Cambridge is or Kitchener at the time, where they were originally, was a 20-minute drive from my house. So I was I got to give this a shot, and, sent them an email, and the rest is history, I guess.
Were you already a fan of the indie scene, or had you kind of gotten away from that? Because I know a lot of people that start a lot of their stories based on I went to a show and I realized that this is within grasp.
I was fully a fan of the indie scene at that point. so there was like a little lull. Obviously, I think everybody who's a wrestling fan kind of takes a break at some point in their life. Mine was between like 2006 to like 2010, I'd say. Um, and it was like the Daniel Bryan, CM Punk, like that. They kind of brought me back in. The Pipe Bomb, 2011, Money in the Bank, like all that hooked me right back in. Um, and then I started discovering like the dirt sheets and the indies and hearing about Kevin Steen and El Generico, and I was like, okay, I got to check these guys out. And then that just unraveled into, okay, now you're watching Evolve and you're watching PWG and New Japan, and I'm just obsessed with it at this point. And Guelph always had, which is where I'm from, Guelph always had the indie shows that would come through, and I never really went to them often because to me at that point I was just I didn't have anybody to go with and all that stuff. But I did go to one of them prior to starting to training, and I saw what the atmosphere was like and the performers, and like Josh Alexander was the main event, and you can't get better than Josh. And I remember seeing him wrestle, and I was like 5 feet away from him, and I'm like, yeah, this is kind of cool. This is what I want to do, right? So wasn't long after that I signed up for training. Yeah.
Was part of being in the crowd and feeling that energy a
Oh,
part of
absolutely.
like making you think like, I want to be on the receiving end of this?
1000%. Yeah, 1000%. It's because I had gone to like WWE live events and stuff before, and that's the WWE, so you expect that pageantry and the crowd to be electric. But even feeling that same kind of emotion with those performers on a personal level, on the indie level, was kind of what got me hooked as well.
Yeah, there's a lot more intimacy when you go to those little shows, and you can feel a lot more like you're a part of it, which makes that next step a little bit easier.
To add on to that Josh story, like after the show ended, like being able to walk like 5 feet to the merch table and just be like, hey man, that was great, was just such a cool feeling for me at the time. Just being like, he's a regular dude, and he loves what he's doing, and it's cool that he takes the time to talk to his fans, right?
So you walk into crossbody for the first time. What are the kind of initial challenges that you're met with, and what are some of the things that maybe come a little more naturally? I'm assuming being in radio broadcasting, you were already a little more comfortable with talking, but what kind of hurdles and what kind of highlights did you have?
So the biggest one for me was just the confidence to believe in myself and the ability to do what it is we were doing. Um, Everything I would like to think everything came rather quickly, but obviously that wasn't the case. I mean, consistency was a big thing for me for a bit. I would show up to class, like every day for a month, and then I'd take like 3 weeks off, and then I'd go every day for another month, and then I'd take like a month off, and it's just it was one of those things. And then COVID happened, and obviously training kind of stopped, right? But those challenges initially was having the confidence in myself, but also understanding that like everybody's there to do the same thing. Everybody's there to work towards the same goal. Um, I was initially worried. These people probably think I'm just awful. These people probably think because I'm not getting it, I'm keeping them back or something like that. But once you kind of realize that it's all one big family and we're all kind of working towards that same goal, it definitely made things a lot easier. And obviously, like building those relationships with your peers and your coaches, like helps you. I guess like that big challenge initially was just kind of getting out of that shell, understanding that people are there to help you and they're not there to judge you, and they want to see you succeed.
Were there any particular individuals amongst your peers or your coaches that really helped motivate you, that really helped you just kind of like get it?
Absolutely. Tyler Loveman, who is one of our coaches, him and I are very close in age, and to me, I think that's what really helped like click, was because at the time I thought I'm way too old to start this. You hear about wrestlers who start at like 16 or whatever in the backyard, and then they're on the indies at 19 and they're just killing it. But I was in my 20s already, and I was like, man, like maybe it's pointless. Like maybe I'm too old to be doing this. And Tyler being so close to my age and already having had such a career at that point, Like, this is someone who had wrestled for Ring of Honor, and he had wrestled independents in the United States and Ontario, and he had done a lot of great things in wrestling and was already so stupidly good. It's ridiculous. But being able to connect with him, and then, realizing we both grew up watching the same wrestling. We both fell in love with the same type of wrestling. And then him being just such a genuinely nice person, like, he is probably the nicest human I've ever met, definitely helped me kind of understand a lot of that. And that's why, when it came time to have my first match and I was asked, is there anybody in particular you'd like to wrestle? He was on my list for sure.
So go over a little bit of those feelings and thoughts leading into that first match. How was your confidence feeling at that point?
I was at an all-time high. I had been training for since 2019, so like close to 5 years at that point. But consistency, like I said before. But my coach, Big Ben, he pulled me aside and he said, "You know what? Like, you got it. Give me 6 weeks of consistency and I'll give you that match." Boom. That's all I needed to hear. 6 weeks. I was there every single day. I was doing all the work I could. And, like I said, he asked me who I wanted to wrestle, and I told him Tyler. And if it wasn't Tyler, it was Matt Grant. And those were my two options. And Tyler was thankfully, available. And as soon as I heard that, I had no worries, because I knew how good he was. Because if people don't know, like, Tyler Thomas is the best kept secret in Canada. Like, he is so good at what he does.
Yeah.
And so going into that match with him, I had no worries. And the only time I got nervous was right before my music hit. I had everything else was under control. I knew what I had to do. I knew how I was going to present myself, but as soon as that music was about to hit, I was like, "Oh, this is happening." And then you can't go back. So, like, the cue hits and you have to just go through the curtain, and that was it.
It just, everything wipes away when you get through that curtain. All the nerves are gone. You're now in the zone.
Yep. And what really helped is I had like 50 of my closest family and friends there. So the crowd was obviously just all behind me and, just pumped to be there. So that helped a lot too. But it also added a lot of nerves, because, you should not be hearing your name chanted before your first match.
Well, I have to imagine that family support is probably another thing that kept you motivated, kept you going. I mean, being able to have a place close enough that 50 of your family members can come out and greet you. Well, at also, you can't turn back.
Yeah, exactly. At that point, like, you're just in it, right? So, no, it was cool. It was definitely a feeling that I'll never forget, for sure.
I'm glad that you brought up Matthew Grant, because I actually want to ask you about a specific match you had with him in Crossbody. I think you know where I'm going with this. It was a lot of weapons, a lot of carnage, fighting around outside the ring. If anybody hasn't seen it, it is on YouTube. It's on one of the episodes of Uproar. I'll see if I can find the link for the description. But I wanted to ask you, what was your mentality going into a match like that, where you knew you're going to get hit chairs, you're going to go through a table, you are going to leave it all out in the ring?
Yeah, I mean, it was great, because at that time we were filming Uproar, which was like a weekly episodic show with Crossbody. So Matt and I had kind of been building up this feud over the course of several weeks, where he was upset that this rookie's getting all these matches, right? And the rookie's getting all these opportunities, and Matt was upset because these are opportunities he should be having. So we decided, like if we're gonna do this, like, let's do this, right? And when the idea of a street fight came up, I was super excited. The first thing that popped in my head, like I brought up before, was CM Punk. Like, I have to wear the cutoff jeans, I have to wear the cutoff shirt, I have to street fight attire, everything. And then, when we started going over what we were going to do, it was just like, okay, well, what do we have to work with here? So we had chairs, we had various weapons. And then I said, well, we got to get a door. Like, we have to get a door. Being such a huge fan of like IWS, for example, out of Montreal, like, they use doors all the time. So I was just like, yeah, we should get some. So, and obviously I wanted to go through it. I thought that would be a really cool visual and a really cool way to kind of tell that story. But yeah, no, I it was great. I mean, it's funny because you get hit with like a kendo stick for the first time and you're like, it's still a lot worse than you would expect. Or you get hit with a chair for the first time and you're like, yep, that still hurts a lot more than I thought. It doesn't matter how tough you are, the first couple always hurt. But the door, easiest thing I've ever had to do. Like, just easiest thing. I just had to take it and I was fine.
At that point, adrenaline is probably taken over to an
Sure.
extreme or to an extent. Sorry, but I'm actually surprised that going into a more brutal, more violent match, you're even more confident than you were previously.
Like I was saying, like it's a testament to Matt too, because I know Matt's been doing this for a long time, and I knew he was going to be safe with me regardless. Like I had full faith in him. I had full trust in him. And we came up with some really cool ideas. Like he went through a chair on his own, and I dropped a chair on him with an elbow drop. Like it was a lot of fun putting that kind of stuff together and coming up with things that we had, like I said, growing up in like the early 2000s, hardcore wrestling was on TV every week, multiple times. So it was cool to be like, oh, we can finally do this little side quest of wrestling.
So now that you're getting matches a little bit more regularly, are there any performers out there on the indie scene that you're kind of hoping to check off a bucket list that you want to get into the ring with?
I got really lucky because my bucket list was written well before I started wrestling. And a lot of those names have already been checked off. Like Matt Grant was on there. Tyler Thomas was on there. Like Psycho Mike was on there, and he was my fourth match. Like,
Wow.
and I got really lucky too because HHV, who is a crossbody guy, and he wrestled years ago on the Indies as well. He was on his way out, and I had just started wrestling, and I kind of turned to Ben, and I was like, "Hey, if we can make this work before he hangs him up, like I would love to." So thankfully that happened. But Ben is on my list. Ben Ortmans. I would love to wrestle my coach. I've wrestled one of them already, so I'd love to wrestle the other. And unfortunately, Notorious TID is retired, so I can't wrestle him. But yeah, I'd say other than Ben, Cecil Nix, I've always wanted to wrestle. I've always considered him one of my favorites on the indies. I get to wrestle Pretty Ricky Wilde next week, and he was on my list, so that's going to get checked off, hopefully. And the White Whale, which I don't think will ever happen, unfortunately, was always RJ City. Like, he was always up top. But, maybe one day he'll have another run and I can sneak in there.
You never know. Wrestling is a crazy industry. Things happen every day that you don't expect. When you're not wrestling, what sort of things do you like to do to pass the time?
Oh boy, I play music. I've been in a band since I was in high school. Obviously, we're not like taking it super seriously right now. We're getting older and we all have our own lives, but we're still great friends. So we get together and we jam and write music and stuff like that. I'm a big football and sports fan. Like, I'll watch NFL every Sunday. I'll play fantasy football and stress over that. But yeah, other than that, like I just love like movies, sports, music, like just your basic entertainment. Video games. I'm a pretty simple dude.
Along that lines, recommend for us one movie, video game, or book, or all.
One movie, video game, or book, or all. Well, my favorite movie of all time is Casablanca. And reason being is I'm a huge history nerd too. Like, I love falling into like Wikipedia traps where you just keep clicking hyperlinks and learning about more and more. But Casablanca to me is such a fascinating story because it's a film about World War II that was shot and released within World War II. So like, people who are in the theaters watching this for the first time have no idea how this story it will end in real time, right? And it's just a really like well done like film, like all around. And there's a reason why it's considered one of the greatest. But I watch it like at least twice a year. Like, it's one of my favorite movies. Video games. I mean, I was obsessed with Fallout 3 for so long. Um, great game. But if something newer, like if you haven't played Red Dead Redemption 2 yet, that's like storytelling at its finest. And there's just so much to it for sure. Books, I couldn't recommend you a book. I love them all. I mean, there's so many options, but Bret Hart's book, great read as well.
Have you had an opportunity to do a lot of traveling now when it comes to wrestling?
I mean, I've gone to shows for sure. I mean, I haven't wrestled much outside of crossbody. Well, I haven't wrestled outside of crossbody yet, I should say. But I've tagged along to shows. Like I've gone to IWS a couple times to ring crew help out. So those Montreal trips are always a bunch of fun. Heading down there super early in the morning and then arriving home the next day exactly 24 hours later. Um, but it's always such a crazy cool atmosphere, like seeing like 3,500 fans in a theater ready to watch some independent wrestling is always great. Um, but other than that, yeah, just mostly like Ontario. Like I've just gone around, but I got my passport, so I'm gonna probably start going across the border and checking those shows out as well.
Any shows or destinations that you would like to eventually hit?
I mean Chicago, Black Label, like all that. Like I'd love to check that out. I'd like to go out west. I want to check out like Love Wrestling out of Alberta. Um, yeah, Defy maybe out west as well would be kind of cool. But yeah, no, I love all wrestling. Like it doesn't matter what it is. I'll check it out for sure. Wrestling to me is so special in the sense that it is a lot like music where everybody's got their own little edge to them, And I think that every promotion kind of presents themselves in such a unique way that it doesn't matter who they are, you'll enjoy it for the most part.
So you clearly have a deep connection with both wrestling and music. Um, how was the process of figuring out your entrance music?
So once again, I was very lucky, which is an ongoing trend, it seems, with my wrestling career so far. A great friend of mine, well, a great friend that I met through wrestling, but a great friend of Ben's, Mike Flash. He does like voiceover work for like Sportsnet and stuff like that. But he's got a home studio and he's very accustomed. He used to work in radio as well, which is why I got a connection with him because we kind of worked at the same station, just different times. And I kind of shot him a message because I was, looking for like royalty free stuff online and, trying to find stuff that I could just, make my own. And I had a really specific sound that I was kind of thinking of, like I really wanted this like 80s inspired, like FTR kind of like the first thing that pops in your head is like live in Technicolor kind of like synth, And I just couldn't figure any of that stuff out. So I messaged Mike and I was like, hey, just out of curiosity, like, do you think you could work something up? He's like, yeah, no problem. And then like first thing he sent me was like perfect. And I was just like, okay, that's exactly what I want. And he's like, cool, let me just fix it up a little bit and then we're good to go. And then, yeah, that's all I needed was that 1 90-second clip of what he came up with because it fit the character I was trying to, portray perfectly.
I can't imagine it gets any easier than that. But what was the idea in your mind then of that character that you wanted to portray?
So with my last name, Gagne, I wanted to pay an homage to, the 80s AWA kind of wrestlers, like I said, like Live and Color and all that. And like FTR, like they do it so well, they have that old school brought to the new school kind of character. And that's kind of what I wanted to do. Like, I didn't want to limit myself to just 80s wrestling. I didn't, I could do the cool sunset flips and I could do all those moves. But, I definitely love modern indie wrestling, 2024 indie wrestling that has, different structure and different moves and, something that you can pull out and still, blow an audience's mind. Right. So I kind of wanted to use that character as like almost ripped out from that time, but thrown into today and, just being, left to the sharks of 2024 and trying to keep up.
What kind of music do you generally like?
Oh boy, I'm all over the map. One day I could be listening to. I'm a big indie rock guy. '90s like rock guy. I love bands like Pavement and Nirvana. Obviously, like the grunge stuff was hard hitting with me. But then there's days where I just listen to a lot of like R&B, like Frank Ocean, and a little bit of hip hop, like Kendrick Lamar. I'm all over the map. And then when I'm in the gym, I got to listen to like heavier music. So I'm listening to like metal that I listened to in like grade 7. Like some death metal, metalcore, whatever needs to get that blood pumping.
So what are your top 3 songs to get the blood pumping when you got a really challenging set coming up?
Top 3 songs. Okay.
Tough questions. Throwing them all out there.
Slipknot's Psychosocial gets me fired up every time. There's a band called Despised Icon. I think they're from Montreal. They have a song called Immaculate. Super heavy, like metalcore, but it's just chugging along and it just helps me get through. And recently, Rhea Ripley's theme song, the This Is My Brutality, gets me pumped.
The intro to that just grabs you right away.
Absolutely.
Did you ever have a moment, whether it was during training, afterwards, once you were starting to book a few matches, where you just kind of sat back and thought, wow, I'm actually doing this?
100%. I literally just had this last week. Because one of our female students at Crossbody, she just had her debut match, Jalen Hill, and she got to tag team with her idol, Kylie Rae.
Yeah.
And afterwards, we're out having dinner, and I'm sitting there and I'm going, Jesus Christ, I'm having a salad next to Kylie Rae. Like, if you would have told me this like 5 years ago, I wouldn't have believed you. And then, that's kind of where at first I was like, what is my life right now? And then, a couple days later, I get like a Twitter follow from Effie. And then I get a Twitter follow from like C4. And then I get the Pretty Ricky Wilde match. And I'm just like, okay, this is crazy. And then I wake up, on Monday of this week, and I see a graphic for Alex Gagne versus Kevin Blackwood. And I'm just like, oh, like,
wow,
what is going on? Yeah, so September 28th at the 8th anniversary show for Crossbody, I'm going head to head with Kevin Blackwood. So came out of nowhere, surprised me. So yeah, now that's basically the last week has been what you just asked. Like, well, what point in my life do I just go?
It's going to be a hard-hitting match against Blackwood.
I'm excited. It'll be great.
If you could go back and give yourself a little bit of advice from when you were starting out, what would you tell yourself, or what would you tell another rookie starting out?
I've told rookies this now, and this is exactly what I would tell myself. But yeah, be consistent. The more consistent you are, the more progress you'll see. Practice makes progress. And that's honestly the most important thing when it comes to professional wrestling training. The more consistent you can be, the better. And now I understand why like wrestling schools have like 8-week boot camps as opposed to just ongoing enrollment, because it makes so much sense to just be there every day for as much as you can. Because we have a student now who's I speak as if I'm a coach, but I'm not. But like we're a family, so there's a student now at Crossbody who started in April, and they've been there every single class pretty much. And their progress in the last 4 months has been astronomical. And it's one of those things where, like, if I could go back and tell myself when I first started, like, be there every day, I would.
Do you see yourself becoming like a locker room leader, trying to help mentor and mold these younger performers?
I mean, I'm still so early in my career myself, so like I don't really think about that. But I do look and to my peers and try and give any sort of advice that I can give. I have been around it. I have been going to shows for 5 years. I have been around it. I haven't been wrestling for 5 years, but I definitely been around, so I know certain things. And when advice is needed that I think I can give, I will provide it. As for becoming that, that'd be cool one day to if when all is said and done, that I could give back. Absolutely, because I love wrestling and I love the people of wrestling. I love the community and the social aspect of wrestling. So yeah, I'm definitely down the road for sure.
So somebody is heading to a show. They've never seen you compete before, and you are on the card. What sort of experience do you want them coming out of once they've seen you perform?
Personally, I want to provide them the best match that I can. I want it to be an entertaining match, but also entertaining in a wrestling sense. So not just, there can be comedy, there can be drama, but I want to provide a match structure that makes sense. I want to give them those highs and lows of watching a wrestling match. I want them to have those pops for those moments where it's, move, 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 boom. Oh my gosh. Like I want to create that feeling where, they think someone's going to kick out or not going to kick out, but they do. I want to give them that hope. I want to give them that heat if that's what they want. I want them to, once that music, the bell rings after the match and the music hits and, we're walking back to the curtain, I want them to turn to the person beside them and go, that was a lot of fun, And I want to give them that. I want to give them hard-hitting moves. I want to give them, hard-hitting strikes. I want to give them moments of confusion, but also moments of excitement. I want them to feel everything. And if I can do that in, 5 to 12 minutes, I'm happy.
Awesome. So before we sign out, do you just want to let everybody know again who you are and where they can find you online?
Yeah, Generational Alex Gagne. You can catch me on Instagram at Generational Gagne, on Twitter at Gen, Gen, Gagne, PW. And you can catch me at Crossbody Pro Wrestling and Norfolk County Championship Wrestling coming up.
Awesome. Thank you so much for doing this. I really appreciate it, man.
Thank you, man. This is my first official ever interview, podcast, anything. So I'm very grateful. And thank you again for having me. It means a lot.
Thank you for tuning in. Please make sure to like, subscribe, and tell a friend.